Jason McBain here for GoBonnies.com alongside ESPN Bracketologist Joe Lunardi. Joe, thanks for joining us for a couple minutes.
You got it.
You've had a number of teams, anywhere between 2 and 5 Atlantic 10 teams in your bracket. What is the A10 looking like right now?
It's certainly pretty widespread, and when it was 5 back in January, it was more a fluke of scheduling than it was actual depth of teams. I think it's going to be 2 or 3 at the end of the day, unless there's a real upset in Atlantic City. I mean, certainly Temple is as close to a lock as you can be at this point. I actually think they could lose every game, including against UMass and against Fordham to close the regular season and their first conference tournament game and still get in. They're that strong. St. Louis is all but there as well now that they've swept Xavier, and they're almost certainly going to finish second in the regular season standings. And then you've got a cluster of teams, just like the league itself, of teams fighting for those last 2 byes and fighting for home games in the first round. I mean, look, if we'd have sat here at the beginning of the year and said Xavier was not going to be in this conversation, right, we would have looked at each other like we had one eye each. But they're barely there. They did it to themselves. They're clearly broken. Maybe not from the neck down, but from the neck up. And, you know, I'm not there every day, so I don't know that it can be fixed. My guess is after 30 games, they are what they are. No one is going to want to play them in Atlantic City because they still have 5 guys who would pretty much start for any team in the league. But eventually, you know, as the legend, you are what your record is, and, you know, they're kind of piddling along with an NIT kind of record. And that's ultimately where I think they'll land.
You mentioned Xavier. You don't get a team that you don't get to see a lot. A team that you do get to see a lot is the St. Joe's team.
Right.
A pivotal game here in the Riley Center tonight. What does a win do for the Hawks? What does a win do for the Bonnies?
Well, I think a win for either is going to get them a bye almost certainly. I know there's a couple of long shot scenarios in which a bye wouldn't happen for St. Joseph's with the win. I don't know if those same scenarios exist for the Bonnies. That if you were to get these two, like if you win out, you're going to get a bye, right? So you control that,
right? And almost looking at the bigger picture in terms of the NCAA.
Well,
for St. Joe's,
look, I think the Hawks are on the bubble. I could make an argument for them to be just in or just out. Personally, you know, I will always lean toward keeping them out until it's obvious, for lots of reasons that probably make sense to people who know who I am, but. I think fundamentally what we have to remember, whether it's the Hawks, the Musketeers, the Bonnies, UMass, Dayton, anybody who might be thinking, you know, fringe at large consideration, is every year, not occasionally, every year, at least 1 and up to 4 for the last dozen years, bids have disappeared during championship week because there are upsets. The most I've ever seen in one, you know, bid thieves, and did a list of them. Most in the last 10 years is 4, the fewest is 1. So, you know, just because you're one of the last ones in today doesn't mean you'd be the last one in then if it matters. So you really want to climb a few rungs up the ladder past that to feel comfortable. And that's why I'm saying the Atlantic 10 is more likely to get 2 than it is, let's say, to get 4.
This is the St. Bonaventure team that's getting pretty hot late in the season when it matters the most. We know the committee looks at the last 10 games.
Yep.
What are the postseason possibilities like for the Bonnies if they don't make a run and win the Atlantic 10 championship?
Well, I'd like to think you're looking at no worse than the NIT, right? You know, it was a pretty competitive non-conference schedule. The NIT, though more quantitative in its selections and seeding than in the old days where, like, if you knew somebody in New York City and you had an NIT history, like both of our schools do, you could get in. But I do think having a marquee player is not a bad idea in the NIT because it still is fundamentally an invitational event, and selling tickets is, you know, better than, I don't know, not selling tickets. And I would think that the Bonnies would be in the NIT at worst, and I think you have a 50-50 shot at being in the top half of an NIT bracket and playing a home game.
We're talking about St. Bonaventure. You picked Andrew Nicholson as your A10 player of the year. What have you seen from him that justified that?
Well, I've just seen the continued progression that's been in place since the first time I saw him here 4 years ago. I mean, he's, by all accounts, I've only spoken to him once, but by all accounts, he's a terrific kid. Off the court, a true student athlete, and, I mean, who else in the league is as good as he is? Like, let's be honest. he's a basket waiting to happen if he gets the ball in his hand. And now he's adding more ways to get that basket. He reminds me a little bit physically of when Ahmad Nivens of St. Joe's was the player of the year in the league 3 years ago. I mean, we weren't very good that year. We were, I don't know, 17-9 or 12. You know, a similar record to what you guys have this year. And you know, without Ahmad Nivens, that year's St. Joseph's team would have been, I don't know, 10-20. I don't see you guys every day, but my guess is without Andrew Nicholson, you'd be about 10-20.
And I think many people would agree with that.
And he has more ways to. He's got a more efficient offensive game than Ahmad did. I don't think he's as explosive off the floor, but Ahmad wasn't particularly explosive off the floor either, and I think that's actually held him back professionally because he doesn't necessarily look the part, and Andrew looks it even less, but you know, he's skilled. Like what's going on right now, the draft combine, which I pay like no attention to, but think about it. Like they draft guys based upon how they look as opposed sometimes to what they've done for 4 years, and just look at the numbers. Like this is not a bottom 10 league that he's dominated, and he's dominated every team in the league multiple times in the course of his career.
Absolutely.
I mean, the game at St. Joe's last year, what did he get? 28, 30? Some still lost by 14, which is more comment maybe on the other guys, but, and you know, he could get 30 tonight and the Bonnies could win by 15, but he's far and away the player of the year in the league, in my view. The other contenders would have been Holloway, who was the player of the year in the league last year, and again, you know, broken. And I think you can make an argument, a strong argument, in fact, for Ramon Moore of Temple, who's the best of an ensemble of guys who can beat you on a given night for Temple. If St. Bonnie is going to beat you on a given night, one guy is going to do it.
Absolutely.
And one guy alone.
High praise from Andrew Nicholson from Joe Lunardi. Joe, thanks for taking 1 minute and joining us.
You got it. Good luck.